Hi everybody, welcome back to 100% Mags. So we're going to be talking about the potential appointment of Steve Bruce coming into Newcastle. And it's been rumoured all over the net that Steve Bruce is on the verge of joining Newcastle as the next potential manager of Newcastle United to replace Rafa Benitez. Now, looking at this, on the internet, when I first seen it, it was really, really depressing. When you think about it, we've had a world-class manager like Rafa Benitez. He's part of the UEFA elite coaches, and now we're being linked to Steve Bruce, who at his best managed Sunderland in the Premier League. And, he didn't even do a very good job when he managed them, to be honest. And, just like most managers that ever managed Sunderland, they never really do a good job. It's just part and parcel of that team in a whole. Sunderland's a really poor club. It proves it when they're in League One, and they can't even get out of a playoff in League One because they lost to Charlton Athletic with a 6-second goal being scored against them in the playoff final, which is absolutely hilarious, I've got to say. That really brightened up my day, when I seen that. And to be honest, looking at this, Steve Bruce coming in is the potential replacement to Rafa Benitez. It's a big step backwards in the whole mentality of what Rafa Benitez has achieved in Newcastle in the 3 years that he's been here. And Rafa wanted to move the club forward. He wanted to start competing with teams like Everton, Leicester, the teams just outside the top six. Also wanted to compete with the teams inside the top six as well. And last season we proved that we could still rock it with the big boys when we beat Man City 2-1. That just proved it right, that if Newcastle had a little bit of investment and a proper owner at the helm, and a decent manager like Rafa Benitez who knew what he was doing, knew his tactics, knew the right players to go and buy, that we could be contenders. We could go back to the 90s style of play like Kevin Keegan had working for the entertainers back in the 90s, and we could start playing that kind of football. Not exactly that kind of football because Rafa Benitez wasn't that kind of manager like Kevin Keegan, but to be honest, it would still be a lot more attractive football than what we're going to be possibly getting this season if Steve Bruce comes in as the manager, because to be honest, Steve Bruce is a similar manager to Alan Pardew, John Carver, Steve McLaren, Joe Kinnear, Sam Allardyce. He's that kind of manager. He doesn't really care for tactics, to be honest. He's even said it himself, he doesn't really take much notice in tactics. So that absolutely amazing defence that Newcastle had last season, is completely going to be shot to crap once somebody like Steve Bruce comes in, because you won't be able to get every ounce of skill out of a player like Fernandes, or you wouldn't be able to get every ounce of skill out of a player like Mo Diami, who was with we. If Steve Bruce had came in a little bit sooner, he would have maybe had Mo Diami, which during his time at Hull City, Mo Diami was actually one of the main reasons for Hull City actually getting promoted into the Premier League when Steve Bruce was the manager. But now Mo Diami has left the club. He's gone off to a Qatar club now, and he's getting paid 100k a week, and I can't blame him, to be honest, because what he was getting paid at Newcastle was absolute peanuts, and pretty much every player at Newcastle gets paid absolute peanuts. I think the highest player on wages is John Joe Shelvey. Correct us if I'm wrong down in the comments below on that one. But to be honest, looking at Steve Bruce, I just wouldn't take him as a manager for Newcastle. You've just had, like I say, a world-class manager in Rafa Benitez. He's won trophies. He's managed at the highest level. He's managed clubs like Liverpool, Chelsea, Inter Milan, Real Madrid, just to name a few. And then you've got a guy like Steve Bruce, who's managed Sheffield United, Wigan, Crystal Palace, Sunderland, Hull, you know, they just aren't on the same level as Chelsea or Liverpool or Real Madrid. You know, it's just a complete opposite. Why would you go from a world-class manager like Rafa Benitez to Steve Bruce? Not offence to the guy, of course, you know, because it's not his fault that he hasn't been able to go and manage clubs like Rafa Benitez has been able to manage. But at the end of the day, you've got to be a really good manager just to be able to go manage them teams. And Rafa Benitez has proven that when he won the Champions League with Liverpool back in 2005. You know, he won the Europa League with Chelsea in 2012. You know, the same Europa League that Newcastle were actually in. And Chelsea ended up winning it against Benfica, who actually knocked us out. So that proves right there, you know, how good of a manager Rafa Benitez was. And now you look at the possible replacements that's been linked to it, you know, Gary Monk, Steve Bruce, Sam Allardyce has even been linked, which, you know, gladfully he turned down, which I'm pretty happy at that, to be honest, you know, that he actually had the common decency to realise that if he took the job that he would be getting a lot of flack, you know, and that's something that the manager should be thinking of when the thought enters their mind of coming to Newcastle as a manager after a guy like Rafa Benitez has been here. Because let's face it, you know, Rafa Benitez is probably one of the best managers we've had since Bobby Robson and Kevin Keegan, in my opinion, you know. But that's just my opinion. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. But to be honest, Rafa Benitez is probably one of the best managers since Bobby and Keegan. And then, of course, you've got Steve Bruce, who's been linked to the job, who just isn't even on that level. Yes, Bobby Robson recommended him for the job, like Pete Graves was saying on his Twitter account, you know, but before, of course, deleting the tweet. But to be honest, you know, Bobby Robson recommended Steve Bruce for the job a long time ago. You know, that was way before he got the job at Sunderland, you know. And to be honest, I just don't see Steve Bruce as the next Newcastle United manager. It is being rumoured that he could be coming in the next few days. If he does, in my opinion, you know, it's a bad recruitment. You shouldn't have went and got a guy like that to manage Newcastle, you know, because at best he's a championship manager, in my opinion. You know, and then of course there's the rumours that his coaching staff, who he's going to be bringing in, 2 ex-Sunderland players, Stephen Agnew and Clements as well. You know, they're 2 ex-Mackhams. And to be honest, his potential signing, and his first potential signing that's been rumoured, is Andy Carroll. Now, I've got nothing against Andy Carroll by all means. You know, I absolutely adore the lad. You know, he was really great for Newcastle when he was here. And then, of course, he went and signed for Liverpool for 35 million. Kenny Dalglish obviously having eyes bigger than his belly on that one. And in the fact that he'd already signed Luis Suarez, which we all know what happened there. Luis Suarez went on to be the bigger player out of the two. And, of course, Andy Carroll ended up being faded into the background and then sold off to West Ham, which he's been there for the remainder of time, you know, till the end of last season, where they finally decided to terminate his contract because of injury problems, which, you know, that's always been a thing with Andy Carroll. He's always had injury problems. But to be honest, Steve Bruce thinks that if he comes in and he signs Andy Carroll on a free, that it's going to win the crowd over. You know, in my opinion, it's not going to win the crowd over, because Andy Carroll, yes, he was a great player forward during his time. You know, he was with number 9. He came up through the ranks at Newcastle, you know, and he is a Geordie lad. But to be honest, he's past his best. He was past his best when he joined Liverpool, you know, because his best days were always in Newcastle. He banged in goals in the Championship forward, and then he came up into the Premier League, banged in goals in the Premier League forward, you know. I was at one game against Chelsea where he actually tapped the ball just around Petr Cech and then banged it into the back of the net, you know, and that just shows you how good he was of a player when he was at Newcastle. But, that Andy Carroll is now a distant memory. The Andy Carroll that we're seeing now in football is just not the same guy. A lot has changed. A lot more injuries have come over him, in his time. And he's now into his 30s as well, so that doesn't even help matters, because Mike Ashley has a policy where you can't sign anybody over the age of 30. It doesn't matter if it's even a free transfer, to be honest, because there's no resellable value there, and that is all Mike Ashley counts on. That's all he ever cares about, is the resell value. You just have to look at people like Musa Sissoko. We brought him in for absolute pennies. We sold him off to Tottenham for 30 million. Andy Carroll was a free. He went to Liverpool for 30 million. Then you've got Jose Perez this season, just a few weeks or so back, and he went off to Leicester City for 30 million. We paid 1.5 million for Jose Perez from Tenerife. All Mike Ashley cares about at Newcastle is profit margins, profit margins, profit margins, and that's always going to be the case. He doesn't care about the club. He's got no ties to the club. He's not even from the area. He's a Cockney at the end of the day. He's got ties to people like Chelsea and Tottenham, who are his clubs that he supports down in the south. And to be honest, till Mike Ashley disappears from Newcastle United, Newcastle will never be able to progress as a club. We'll never be able to compete with teams like Everton, Leicester City, even the top six. Aston Villa proved that with a little bit of financial backing that you can make wonders happen. They won in the playoff final for the Championship against a Derby County side that was a really good side, and Frank Lampard worked his ass off on that squad, and now he's at Chelsea after the work that he did for Derby. And to be honest, there was some little controversial moments in that match that I actually did watch that Derby Villa match, and there was some controversial moments. But to be honest, looking at how Aston Villa have come into this Premier League, the season hasn't even started yet, and Aston Villa's already spent 91 million. That's more than Mike Ashley has spent in Newcastle in the 12 years that he's owned with. That shows you how bad Mike Ashley is as an owner. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. Until next time, remember, like, share, subscribe to 100% Mags, and I'll see you all next time. Bye, the lads.